You're listening to Midwest Covencast presents Weekend Reads. I'm Marilyn of Midwest Covencast, and each week I will be reading to you, dear listeners, occult works that are in the public domain. All of this I do with the goal of helping each of us grow in our knowledge and practices. Here in Season 1, we will be making our way through Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy or magic, published in 1531. I hope you enjoy this week's installment. Chapter 7. Of the kinds of compounds, what relation they stand in to the elements, and what relation there is betwixt the elements themselves and the soul, senses, and dispositions of men. Next, after the 4 simple elements, follow the 4 kinds of perfect bodies compounded of them, and they are stones, metals, plants, and animals. And although unto the generation of each of these all of the elements meet together in the composition, yet every one of them follows and resembles one of the elements which is most predominant. For all stones are earthy, for they are naturally heavy, and descend, and so harden with dryness that they cannot be melted. But metals are waterish, and may be melted, which naturalists confess, and chemists find to be true, viz., that they are generated of a viscous water, or waterish argent vive. Plants have such an affinity with the air, that unless they be abroad in the open air, they do neither bud nor increase. So also all animals have in their natures a most fiery force, and also spring from a celestial source. And fire is so natural to them, that being extinguished, they presently die. And again, every one of those kinds is distinguished within itself by reason of degrees of the elements. For amongst the stones, they especially are called earthy, that are dark and more heavy, and those waterish, which are transparent, and are compacted of water, as crystal, beryl, and pearls, and the shells of fishes. And they are called airy, which swim upon the water, and are spongeous, as the stones of a sponge, the pumice stone, and the stone sophis. Note: probably meerschaum, sea froth, or sepiolite, one of the basilicates. And they are called fiery, out of which fire is extracted, or which are produced of fire, as thunderbolts, firestones, and the stone asbestos. Also amongst metals, lead and silver are earthy. Quicksilver is waterish. Copper and tin are airy, and gold and iron are fiery. In plants also, the roots resemble the earth by reason of their thickness, and the leaves water, because of their juice. Flowers, the air, because of their suitability, and the seeds, the fire, by reason of their multiplying spirit. Besides, they are called some hot, some cold, some moist, some dry, borrowing their names from the qualities of the elements. Amongst animals also, some are in comparison of others earthy, and dwell in the bowels of the earth, as worms and moles, and many other small creeping vermin. Others are watery, as fishes, others airy, which cannot live out of the air. Note: birds in general are undoubtedly here meant. Others also are fiery, living in the fire, as salamanders and crickets, such as are of the fiery heat, as pigeons, ostriches, lions, and such, as the wise man calls beasts breathing fire. Besides, in animals, the bones resemble the earth, flesh the air, the vital spirit the fire, and the humours the water. And these humours also partake of the elements, for yellow choler is instead of fire, blood instead of air, phlegm instead of water, and black choler or melancholy instead of earth. And lastly, in the soul itself, according to Austin, the understanding resembles fire, reason the air, imagination the water, and the senses the earth. And these senses also are divided amongst themselves, by reason of the elements, for the sight is fiery, neither can it perceive without fire and light. The hearing is airy, for sound is made by the striking of the air. The smell and taste resemble the water, without the moisture of which there is neither smell nor taste. And lastly, the feeling is wholly earthy, and taketh gross bodies for its object. The actions also, and the operations of man, are governed by the elements. The earth signifies a slow and firm motion. The water signifies fearfulness and sluggishness, and reminisces in working. Air signifies cheerfulness and an amiable disposition, but fire a fierce and quick and angry disposition. The elements, therefore, are the first of all things, and all things are of and according to them, and they are in all things, and diffuse their virtues through all things. Chapter 8. How the elements are in the heavens, in stars, in devils, in angels, and lastly, in God himself. It is the unanimous consent of all Platonists that as in the original and exemplary world, all things are in all, so also in the corporeal world, all things are in all. So also the elements are not only in these inferior bodies, but also in the heavens, in stars, devils, in angels, and lastly in God, the maker and original example of all things. Now in these inferior bodies, the elements are accompanied with much gross matter. But in the heavens, the elements are with their natures and virtues, viz., after a celestial and more excellent manner than in sublunary things. For the firmness of the celestial earth is there without the grossness of water, and the agility of the air without running over its bounds, the heat of fire without burning, only shining and giving life to all things by its heat. Amongst the stars also, some are fiery as Mars and Sol, airy as Jupiter and Venus, watery as Saturn and Mercury, and earthy, such as inhabit the eighth orb. Note: a supposedly transparent envelope or azure sphere enclosing the earth, and other like spheres within which were carried the planetary bodies. And the moon, which notwithstanding by many is accounted watery, seeing, as if it were earth, it attracts to itself the celestial waters, with which, being imbibed, it doth, by reason of its nearness to us, pour out and communicate to us. There are also amongst the signs, note, the 12 houses or divisional parts of the zodiac, some fiery, some earthy, some airy, some watery. The elements rule them also in the heavens, distributing to them these four threefold considerations of every element, viz., the beginning, middle, and end. So Aries possesseth the beginning of fire, Leo the progress and increase, and Sagittarius the end. Taurus the beginning of the earth, Virgo the progress, Capricorn the end. Gemini the beginning of the air, Libra the progress, Aquarius the end. Cancer the beginning of water, Scorpius the middle, and Pisces the end. Of the mixtions, therefore, of these planets and signs, together with the elements, are all bodies made. Moreover, devils also are upon this account distinguished the one from the other, so that some are called fiery, some earthy, some airy, and some watery. Hence, also, those four infernal rivers, fiery Phlegethon, airy Cocytus, watery Styx, earthy Acheron. Also in the Gospel we read of hellfire and eternal fire, into which the cursed shall be commanded to go. And in the Revelation we read of a lake of fire. And Isaiah speaks of the damned, that the Lord will smite them with corrupt air. And in Job they shall skip from the waters of the snow to extremity of heat. And in the same we read that the earth is dark, and covered with the darkness of death and miserable darkness. Moreover also, these elements are placed in the angels in heaven and the blessed intelligences. There is in them a stability of their essence, which is an earthly virtue, in which is the steadfast seat of God. Also their mercy and piety is a watery cleansing virtue. Hence, by the palmist, they are called waters, where he, speaking of the heavens, saith, who rulest the waters that are higher than the heavens. Note: see Psalm cxivii 4. Waters that be above the heavens. Genesis 1, 6-9 is also noteworthy. The watery triplicity of the zodiac may properly be termed as waters above the heavens, or celestial waters. Also in them their subtle breath is air, and their love is shining fire. Hence they are called in Scripture the wings of the wind. And in another place the psalmist speaks of them, who markest angels thy spirits, and thy ministers a flaming fire. Also, according to orders of angels, some are fiery, as seraphim, and authorities and powers, earthy, as cherubim, watery, as thrones and archangels, airy, as dominions and principalities. Do we not also read of the original Maker of all things, that the earth shall be opened and bring forth a Savior? Is it not spoken of the same, that he shall be a fountain of living water, cleansing and regenerating? Is not the same Spirit breathing the breath of life, and the same, according to Moses and Paul's testimony, a consuming fire? That elements, therefore, are to be found everywhere, and in all things after their manner, no man can deny. First in these inferior bodies, seculent and gross, and in celestials more pure and clear, but in supercelestials living, and in all respects blessed. Elements, therefore, in the exemplar world are ideas of things to be produced, in intelligences are distributed powers, in heavens are virtues, and in inferior bodies gross forms. Chapter 9. Of the virtues of things natural, depending immediately upon elements. Of the natural virtues of things, some are elementary, as to heat, to cool, to moisten, to dry, and they are called operations, or first qualities. And the second act, for these qualities only do wholly change the whole substance, which none of the other qualities can do. And some are in things compounded of elements, and these are more than first qualities, and such are those that are maturing, digesting, resolving, mollifying, hardening, restringing, upsturging, corroding, burning, opening, evaporating, strengthening, mitigating, conglutinating, obstructing, expelling, retaining, attracting, repercussing, stupefying, bestowing, lubrifying, and many more. Elementary qualities do many things in a mixed body which they cannot do in the elements themselves, and these operations are called secondary qualities, because they follow the nature and proportion of the mixtion of the first virtues, as largely it is treated of in physic books. As maturation, which is the operation of natural heat according to a certain proportion in the substance of the matter, so induration is the operation of cold. So also is congelation, and so of the rest. And these operations sometimes act upon a certain member, as such, which provoke water, milk, the flow, and they are called third qualities, which follow the second, as the second do the first. According, therefore, to these first, second, and third qualities, many diseases are both cured and caused. Many things also there are artificially made, which men much wonder at, as is fire, which burns water, which they call the Greek fire, of which Aristotle teacheth many compositions in his particular treatise of this subject. In like manner, there is made a fire that is extinguished with oil, and is kindled with cold water when it is sprinkled upon it, and a fire which is kindled either with rain, wind, or the sun, and there is made a fire which is called burning water, the confection whereof is well known, and it consumes nothing but itself. And also there are made fires that cannot be quenched, and incombustible oils, and perpetual lamps, which can be extinguished neither with wind, nor water, nor any other way. Which seems utterly incredible, but that there had been such a most famous lamp, which once did shine in the temple of Venus, in which the stone asbestos did burn, which being once fired, can never be extinguished. Also, on the contrary, wood, or any other combustible matter, may be so ordered that it can receive no harm from the fire. And there are made certain confections, with which the hands being anointed, we may carry red-hot iron in them, or put them into melted metal, or go with our whole bodies, being first anointed therewith, into the fire, without any manner of harm. And such like things as these may be done. There is also a kind of flax, which Pliny calls asbestum, the Greeks called abesin, which is not consumed by fire, of which Anaxagoras saith that a tree compassed about with it may be cut down with insensible blows that cannot be heard. Chapter 10. Of the occult virtues of things. There are also other virtues in things, which are not from any element, as to expel poison, to drive away the noxious vapors of minerals, to attract iron or anything else. And these virtues are a sequel of the species and form of this or that thing, whence also, they being little in quantity, are of great efficacy, which is not granted to any elementary quality. For these virtues, having much form and little matter, can do very much. But an elementary virtue, because it hath more materiality, requires much matter for its acting. And they are called occult qualities, because their causes lie hid, and man's intellect cannot in any way reach and find them out. Wherefore philosophers have attained to the greatest part of them by long experience, rather than by the search of reason, for as in the stomach the meat is digested by heat, which we know, so it is changed by a certain hidden virtue, which we know not. For truly it is not changed by heat, because then it should rather be changed by the fireside than in the stomach. So there are in things, besides the elementary qualities, which we know, other certain inbred virtues created by nature, which we admire and are amazed at, being such as we know not, and indeed seldom or never have seen. As we read in Ovid of the phoenix, one only bird, which renews herself. All birds from others do derive their birth, but yet one fowl there is in all the earth, called by the Assyrians phoenix, who the wane of age repairs and sows herself again. And in another place, Egyptians came to see this wondrous sight, and this rare bird is welcomed with delight. Long since Matthias brought a very great wonderment upon the Greeks and Romans concerning himself. He said that he nourished and bred a beast that did devour itself. Hence many to this day are solicitous what this beast of Matthias should be. Who would not wonder that fishes should be digged out of the earth, of which Aristotle, Theophrastus, and Polybius, the historian, makes mention, and those things which Pausanias wrote concerning the singing stones. All these are effects of occult virtues. So the ostrich concocts cold and most hard iron, and digests it into nourishment for his body, whose stomach they also report cannot be hurt with red-hot iron. So that little fish, called Eichnic, doth so curb the violence of the winds, and appease the rage of the sea, that let the tempests be never so imperious and raging, the sails also bearing a full gale, it doth notwithstanding by its mere touch stay the ships, and makes them stand still, that by no means they can be moved. So salamanders and crickets live in the fire, although they seem sometimes to burn, yet they are not hurt. The like is said of a kind of bitumen, with which the weapons of the Amazons were said to be smeared over, by which means they could be spoiled neither with sword nor fire, with which also the gates of Caspia, made of brass, are reported to be smeared over by Alexander the Great. We read also that Noah's ark was joined together with this bitumen, and that it endured some thousands of years upon the mountains of Armenia. There are many such kind of wonderful things, scarce credible, which, notwithstanding, are known by experience, amongst which antiquity makes mention of satyrs, which were animals, in shape half men and half brutes, yet capable of speech and reason. One whereof St. Hierome reporteth spake once unto holy Antonius the hermit, and condemned the error of the Gentiles in worshipping such poor creatures as they were, and desired him that he would pray unto the true God for him. Also he affirms that there was one of these satyrs shewed openly alive, and afterwards sent to Constantine the emperor. Chapter 11. How occult virtues are infused into the several kinds of things by ideas, through the help of the soul of the world, and rays of the stars, and what things abound most with this virtue. Platonists say that all inferior bodies are exemplified by the superior ideas. Now they define an idea to be a form above bodies, souls, minds, and to be one simple, pure, immutable, indivisible, incorporeal, and eternal, and that the nature of all ideas in the first place is in very goodness itself, i.e., God by way of cause, and that they are distinguished amongst themselves by some relative considerations only, lest whatsoever is in the world should be out one thing without any variety, and that they agree in essence, lest God should be a compound substance. In the second place, they place them in the very intelligible itself, i.e., in the soul of the world, differing the one from the other by absolute forms, so that all the ideas in God indeed are but one form, but in the soul of the world they are many. They are placed in the minds of all other things, whether they be joined to the body or separated from the body by a certain participation, and now by degrees are distinguished more and more. They place them in nature as certain small seed of forms infused by the ideas, and lastly they place them in matter as shadows. Hereunto may be added, that in the soul of the world there may be as many seminal forms of things as ideas in the mind of God, by which forms she did in the heavens above the stars frame to herself shapes also, and stamped upon all these some properties. On these stars, therefore, shapes and properties, all virtues of inferior species, as also their properties do depend, so that every species hath its celestial shape, or figure that is suitable to it, from which also proceeds a wonderful power of operating, which proper gift it receives from its own idea, through the seminal forms of the soul of the world. For ideas are not only essential causes of every species, but are also the causes of every virtue, which is in the species. And this is that which many philosophers say, that the properties which are in the nature of things, which virtues, indeed, are the operations of the ideas, are moved by certain virtues, viz., such as have a certain and sure foundation, not fortuitous nor casual, but efficacious, powerful, and sufficient, doing nothing in vain. Now these virtues do not err in their actings, but by accident, viz., by reason of the impurity or inequality of the matter. For upon this account there are found things of the same species, more or less powerful, according to the purity or indisposition of the matter. For all celestial influences may be hindered by the indisposition and insufficiency of the matter. Whence it was a proverb among the Platonists, that celestial virtues were infused according to the desert or merit of the matter, which also Virgil makes mention of when he sings. Their natures fiery are, and from above, and from gross bodies free divinely move. Wherefore, those things in which there is less of the idea of the matter, i.e., such things which have a greater resemblance of things separated, have more powerful virtues in operation, being like to the operation of the separated idea. We see then that the situation and figure of celestials is the cause of all those excellent virtues that are in inferior species. Note: an idea of a pure element, whether the element be of time, space, or matter, is an idea that pertains exclusively to such element, correlating with it as perfectly as the idea is perfect. As such, idea must be evolved in an intelligent use of such element. So ideas are essential to occult experiment. Chapter 12. How it is that particular virtues are infused into particular individuals, even of the same species. There are also in many individuals or particular things peculiar gifts, as wonderful as in the species, and these also are from the figure and situation of celestial stars. For every individual, when it begins to be under a determined horoscope and celestial constellation, contracts together with its essence a certain wonderful virtue, both of doing and suffering, something that is remarkable, even besides that which it receives from its species. And this it doth partly by the influence of the heaven, and partly through that obedientialness of the matter of things to be generated, to the soul of the world, which obedientialness, indeed, is such as that of our bodies to our souls. For we perceive that there is this in us, that according to our conceptions of things our bodies are moved, and that cheerfully, as when we are afraid of or fly from anything. So, many times, when the celestial souls conceive several things, then the matter is moved obediently to it. Also in nature, there appear diverse prodigies by reason of the imagination of superior motions. So also they conceive and imagine diverse virtues, not only things natural, but also sometimes things artificial, and this especially if the soul of the operator be inclined towards the same. Whence Avicen saith, that whatsoever things are done here must have been done before in the motions and conceptions of the stars and orbs. So in things various effects, inclinations, and dispositions are occasioned not only from the matter variously disposed, as many suppose, but from a various influence and diverse form, not truly with a specifical difference, but peculiar and proper. And the degrees of these are variously distributed by the first cause of all things, God himself, who being unchangeable distributes to every one as he pleaseth, with whom, notwithstanding, second causes, angelical and celestial, cooperate, disposing of the corporeal matter and other things that are committed to them. All virtues, therefore, are infused by God through the soul of the world, yet by a particular power of resemblances and intelligences overruling them, and concourse of the rays and aspects of the stars in a certain peculiar harmonious consent. Chapter 13. Whence the occult virtues of things proceed. It is well known to all that there is a certain virtue in the lodestone by which it attracts iron, and that the diamond doth by its presence take away the virtue of the lodestone. So also amber and jet, rubbed and warmed, draw a straw to them, and the stone asbestos, being once fired, is never or scarce extinguished. A carbuncle shines in the dark. The stone Aedes, put above the young fruit of women or plants, strengthens them, but being put under, weakeneth. The jasper stauncheth blood. The little fish Echinus stops the ships. Rhubarb expels choler. The liver of the chameleon, burnt, raiseth showers and thunders. The stone, heliotrope, dazzles the sight, and makes him that wears it to be invisible. The stone, laicurius, takes away delusions from before the eyes. The perfume of the stone, liparis, calls forth all the beasts. The stone sinacitus brings up infernal ghosts. The stone anicitus makes the images of the gods appear. The anectus, put under them that dream, causeth oracles. There is an herb in Ethiopia, with which, they report, ponds and lakes are dried up of all things that are shut to be opened. And we read of an herb called lattice, which the Persian kings give to their ambassadors, that whithersoever they shall come, they shall abound with plenty of all things. There is also a Scythian herb, with which, being tasted or at least held in the mouth, they report the Scythians will endure 12 days' hunger and thirst. And Apuleius saith that he was taught by an oracle that there were many kinds of herbs and stones with which men might prolong their lives forever, but that it was not lawful for men to understand the knowledge of those things, because, whereas they have but a short time to live, they study mischief with all of their might, and attempt all manner of wickedness. If they should be sure of a very long time, they would not spare the gods themselves. But from whence these virtues are none of all these, have shewed who have set forth huge volumes of the proprieties of things, not Hermes, not Bacchus, not Aaron, not Orpheus, not Theophrastus, not Thebeth, not Xenothemis, not Zoroaster, not Evax, not Dioscordes, not Isaac the Jew, not Zacharias the Babylonian, not Albertus, not Arnoldus. And yet all these have confessed the same, that Zacharias writes to Mithridates, that great power and human destinies are couched in the virtues of stones and herbs. But to know from whence these come, a higher speculation is required. Alexander the Peripatetic, not going any further than his senses and qualities, is of the opinion that these proceed from elements, and their qualities, which haply might be supposed to be true if those were of the same species. But many of the operations of the stones agree neither in genre nor specie. Therefore Plato and his scholars attribute these virtues to ideas, the formers of things. But Avicen reduceth these kinds of operations to intelligences, Hermes to the stars, Albertus to the specifical forms of things. And although these authors seem to thwart one the other, yet none of them, if they be rightly understood, goes beside the truth, since all their sayings are the same in effect in most things. For God, in the first place, is the end and beginning of all virtues. He gives the seal of the ideas to his servants, the intelligences, who, as faithful officers, sign all things entrusted to them with an ideal virtue. The heavens and stars as instruments, disposing the matter in the meanwhile for the receiving of those forms which reside in divine majesty, as saith Plato to Timaeus. And to be conveyed by stars, and the giver of forms distributes them by the ministry of his intelligences, which he hath set as rulers and controllers over his works, to whom such a power is entrusted in things committed to them, that so all virtues of stones, herbs, metals, and all other things may come from the intelligences, the governors. The form, therefore, and virtue of things comes first from the ideas, then from the ruling and governing intelligences, then from the aspects of the heavens disposing, and lastly from the tempers of the elements disposed, answering the influences of the heavens by which the elements themselves are ordered or disposed. These kinds of operations, therefore, are performed in these inferior things by express forms, and in the heavens by disposing virtues, in intelligences by mediating rules, and the original cause by ideas and exemplary forms, all which must of necessity agree in the execution of the effect and virtue of every thing. There is, therefore, a wonderful virtue and operation in every herb and stone, but greater in a star, beyond which, even from the governing intelligences, every thing receiveth and obtains many things for itself, especially from the supreme cause, with whom all things do mutually and exactly correspond, agreeing in an harmonious consent, as it were in hymns, always praising the highest maker of all things, as by 3 children in the fiery furnace, were all things called upon to praise God with singings. Bless ye the Lord, all things that grow upon the earth, and all things which move in the waters, all fowls of the heavens, beasts and cattle, together with the sons of men. There is, therefore, no other cause of the necessity of effects than the connections of all things with the first cause, and their correspondency with those divine patterns and eternal ideas whence everything hath its determinate and particular place in the exemplary world, from whence it lives and receives its original being. And every virtue of herbs, stones, metals, animals, words, and speeches, and all things that are God, is placed there. Now the first cause, which is God, although he doth by intelligences and the heavens work upon these inferior things, doth sometimes, these mediums being laid aside, or their officiating being suspended, works those things immediately by himself, which works then are called miracles. But whereas secondary causes, which Plato and others call handmaids, do by the command and appointment of the first cause necessarily act, and are necessitated to produce their effects, if God shall, notwithstanding, according to his pleasure, so discharge and suspend them, that they shall wholly desist from the necessity of that command and appointment, then they are called the greatest miracles of God. So the fire in the Chaldeans' furnace did not burn the children. So also the sun at the command of Joshua went back from its course, the space of a whole day. So also at the prayer of Hezekiah, it went back 10 degrees, or hours. So when Christ was crucified, the sun was darkened, though at full moon. And the reason of these operations can by no rational discourse, no magic, or occult, or profound science whatsoever be found out or understood, but are to be learned and inquired into by divine oracles only. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Midwest Covencast Presents Weekend Reads. Join me next week for the next installment as we continue through Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy or magic. For more information about Midwest Covencast, you can visit our website at midwestcovencast.com. You can also follow us on social media at Midwest Covencast on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, or at Midwest Coven on Twitter. We hope to see you there. Until next time, Coven, blessed be.